We are live. It is 3 o'clock and it is Wednesday, our normal slot for Sell Like a CPCU. Hello, everyone. My name is Matthew Struck. My usual co-host, Precious, is again this week has a little bit of a conflict, but so she might actually chime in like she did last week. So we'll see if she throws some comments or questions into the feed to help us along here. But for anyone who's unfamiliar with this, it's your first time watching us live or maybe the recorded version of this. This is Sell Like a CPCU. We are put on by the Agents and Brokers Interest Group of the CPCU Society. We are here to give agents and brokers tips, tricks, little tools that are available to them that they may or may not know about, and just pretty much anything that gives them some ability to enhance their value proposition and outcompete their competitors. So really quickly, a little bit of business here. If you are watching live or the recorded version, please like, comment, subscribe, share, hit the retweet, hit the notification bell for all notifications so that when we go live, you get a notification of it. And pretty much anything else you can do to put it out there and help us share this production. So without further ado, I am joined, and I have the very lucky opportunity to be joined today by our special guest, Taira Mandy from Ask Kodiak. How's it going, Taira?
Good, Matthew. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. I'm really happy you're joining us from Canada, right? So we got a little international live cast going on here.
Yeah, it's about 9 degrees outside where I am today. So
oh wow,
nice and cold.
Yeah, and originally you're from Boston. So if you were, or I'm not originally, but I mean, right now you kind of hang your hat permanently in Boston, right? So if you were at home, you'd be preparing for Snowmageddon, just like most of us on the East Coast are, right?
That's right. Cold and snow either way. So I can't complain.
Yeah, a little bit of White Christmas wouldn't necessarily be a bad thing. That's for sure.
That's right.
And actually, Precious is logging in remotely, which is nice. So she will be here to help support us with some comments and questions along the way to help guide the conversation. She will be back soon to watch the rest. But so, Taira, really quickly, in terms of Ask Kodiak and your position there, what is your formal position for anyone who doesn't know you or Ask Kodiak? And, what do you kind of do on the daily for Ask Kodiak?
Yeah, so I'm a customer success manager with Ask Kodiak. So I am really in the business of customer happiness and making sure that our partners, our customers have the tools and the support that they need in order to be successful with us and with our software. Make sure we're communicating effectively and efficiently, and just make sure that we're helping our customers get the most out of the software that we provide.
Yeah, you help keep the inmates happy is what you do.
That's right. That's right. Keep the wheels turning.
Yeah. Well, that's good. That's good. All right. So in that context, you being taken care of basically the customers and the client base, what specifically would you say that Ask Kodiak brings to the table in terms of what it does and its value proposition?
Yeah, so Ask Kodiak, we are a commercial search engine for appetite and eligibility. So we are really, we are trying to optimize commercial insurance and create a more efficient sales process between brokers and carriers or other, non-traditional distributors of insurance. So, on the agency side, our tools help create efficiencies by connecting retail agents with the right market for a specific type of risk faster. And on the carrier side, we're helping carriers and like MGAs, wholesalers, we're helping them get organized on appetite, create greater transparency around their appetite so they can write more of the business that they want to write, as opposed to spending some time shifting through submissions on business that they would ultimately decline. So we're really, I think a lot of Insurtechs maybe get the reputation of being a disruptor of industry, but what we're really trying to do is kind of be a synergy and just build that efficiency and help save everyone a little bit of time and energy through that sales cycle.
Oh, that's definitely in the sales process for brokers. I can tell you that's a welcome thing.
Right.
As soon as you on to that next sale or opportunity, I think is a huge deal. And in that vein of, like you talked about, how Insurtech sometimes or a lot of times are thought of as disruptors, or they're just kind of like going to murky the waters of, what most people would condescend to think an otherwise efficient and, very put together industry. There is an enterprise solution too that Ask Kodiak is. I don't know. Are you still working on it? I think the last thing I heard was you were working with carriers, because even some of the larger generalists, some of the people internally just don't know what they write outside of their vertical, right? Are you still looking at that as a vertical to work in?
Yeah, we obviously help connect an external sales force to carriers or wholesalers, but we've also got a lot of distributors of insurance that could utilize that organization that Ask Kodiak provides, just to get everyone internally on the same page. And we
Yeah.
see that as a use case for a lot
Yeah.
of our distributors that we partner with. Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah, I think any broker that has dealt with some of the large behemoth carriers in the industry, I think they'll appreciate that. Not that they'll necessarily see that on the front end of their interaction with the carrier, but I can tell you multiple times, not to name a carrier, but especially the ones that deal with business internationally, I would go through whoever my designated property and casualty mid-market or large underwriter was, and they would say, no, we don't write this, or it just doesn't fit our risk appetite.
Right.
And then we come to find out that we lost the business to that same carrier because somewhere there was like an MGA or a program internally that they didn't know about that would write it and was actually actively writing it and really competitive.
Right.
I think that would help a whole lot. I do have to say, as a disclaimer, because we're part of the CPC Society, we don't necessarily, we're not vouching for or advocating that anyone use Ask Kodiak. I would always say that, everyone should test it out and try, and we're just kind of like bringing information to the forefront here. Full disclosure, I am a user of Ask Kodiak. I appreciate the user interface. And so it really kind of it acts as, I guess, a replacement maybe for the old Ivans engine. Have you heard people say that before?
Yeah, Ivans is another tool in the marketplace that focuses on appetite, similarly to Ask Kodiak. Ask Kodiak, again, just trying to kind of bridge that gap between brokers looking for a specific place to put a risk. So you think about like the agent or the broker experience, and you're looking for a home for a particular type of risk. How often do you have like 5 to 15 different tabs open, trying to kind of comb through and find the right house for that particular risk? We're trying to just build efficiencies around that to take some of the guesswork out of it, take some of the time and energy out of that process, and turn those 15 tabs into one, and have that be askkodiak.com, where you can find the most relevant market for a particular type of risk.
Yeah. And there's also an element of social proof built into it, right? So like, just because a carrier says it writes something, is there some kind of feedback on the back end as to whether or not they're actually actively writing it?
Yeah, what's cool about Ask Kodiak is that the appetite that's built in there, it's maintained by the carriers. So the carriers themselves are the ones who are going in, maintaining that appetite, building it out, putting the eligibility parameters around it. And then if an agent were to submit something and were to get it kicked back and be told, this actually isn't part of our appetite, there is a feedback functionality there where that agent can leave feedbacks, and it'll go directly to that carrier saying, hey, you've got this marked off as being an appetite, the specific business description or business class, whatever it might be. But it's, we actually received a declination. So there's a little bit of community monitoring there, which has been really helpful.
Yeah, I think a lot of brokers or even marketing managers, if they haven't been introduced to Ask Kodiak or a similar solution, even if they're not using Ivans, they would be, I think their world would be made a lot easier, because I can remember some of the marketing managers that I've worked with in the past, and they all have like that binder that's like full of all of the risk appetite flyers from each one of the carriers that they work with.
Right.
And they're just kind of like, every single time they're presented with a new risk, they're kind of, manually flipping through that folder just to see that, GL code or that kind of operational name listed.
Exactly.
This is definitely a lot more efficient of a solution. So in terms of the space that Ask Kodiak fills, is it what's more difficult? Is it getting the brokers to kind of access and utilize the platform, or is it kind of the carrier buy-in? Because I know, look, we have technology issues on both sides of that. I'm wondering if one is kind of a more difficult bridge to or gap to bridge.
Yeah, that's the chicken or the egg question for Ask Kodiak. But I think what we find is the agents come to play kind of organically as the carriers and wholesalers and distributors of insurance join the program and see the benefits in kind of getting organized on appetite and speaking, an industry language on appetite, getting those carriers on board. The carriers are our customers, so our carriers pay a subscription, and agents can sign up and use the platform for free from a searching perspective. So I wouldn't say there's a ton of difficulty on either side, because I think for us, we're trying to solve what's a really relevant problem in the industry. So being able to describe the functionality of Ask Kodiak and what we do, I think carriers are excited to adapt that technology. And once we get the carriers really creating really useful content in terms of product guide and appetites, their agents want to come check it out. So we've seen pretty organic growth on the agency side just through the carrier content that we've got out there today.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I would say it's definitely something where, so I want to throw this up really quickly. This is obviously not going to be a full-scale walkthrough, nor would I ever condescend to say that I'm an expert at using Ask Kodiak, okay? But this is kind of like the proof factor. So like brokers, when you hear about this, it either sounds one, too good to be true, or two, you're like, yeah, but I don't know if it's actually going to be usable or if it's going to fit within my, workflow or whatever. It is really, I mean, you guys have done a fantastic job of making the UI just extremely simple. And yet it's still powerful, right? Like there's a beauty in that. And I fully appreciate that. What's one of the ones, like if I throw in a classification code, like, do you think like roofers is a good one to look at?
Yeah.
Roofing contractor, let's see.
Pretty much anything, you should be able to get some results in that search bar. We've tried to make it a really intelligent search tool from a fuzzy search perspective, where you can put, a funny example is like you could put Elvis in there if you're looking for an Elvis impersonator, and it's going to connect you to the right NAICS, which should be like independent entertainer. Yeah, give it a try.
Oh, hold on, I got to do this. All right, so we're looking for Elvis impersonator, but it comes out, okay, entertainers independent. All right. And I don't know, what risk does an independent Elvis impersonator have? General liability, I would think, is like the biggest one, right?
Needs that. Yeah.
All right. So automatically, before we've even kind of like narrowed it down further, now we're down to about a handful here of markets and or wholesalers and MGAs that will write this business, right? And then I think you can go further down into here. So if you're looking at, New Jersey, which is kind of difficult sometimes in terms of the regulatory environment, but you can even narrow it down by premium, how the entity is kind of formed, whether it's an LLC or a S Corp or whatever, even revenues and payrolls. But, so just our Elvis impersonator right here, if it's something that you don't write a lot of impersonators or individual entertainers, and it is something you want to capitalize on, you now have the opportunity to look at, Liberty Mutual, Chubb, Ace, Westchester, CNF, and a couple of others here, Nautilus, AIG. And what I appreciate about this is it gives you a sense of kind of the insurance continuum here. And if you're a broker and you're looking to get into a vertical, like say this is the second or third one that you've written, okay? I don't know if that's I don't know if Elvis impersonate, maybe in Las Vegas, right, is a very viable marketplace. Right. I'm sure it's pretty competitive in Las Vegas too, but if you want to write a bunch of them, the other thing that it gives you is you're going to go to this screen and you're basically going to pull it up and you're going to say, oh, I'm appointed with Liberty Mutual. Fantastic. I'm appointed with Chubb. Heck, I didn't know that Crum and Forster would write this, or I didn't know that there were, opportunities to write through Nautilus or AIG on these things. And if you're not appointed, or maybe you're appointed and you just never even thought to have that conversation, it then keys you into that as well, which is fantastic. And again, I can't stress it enough. You said it was a carrier fee basically for them to be listed on the platform, right?
Yeah, a monthly subscription for those who are posting appetite on Ask Kodiak. So our customers are carriers, or it could be like a non-traditional distributor, like a wholesaler MGA, someone like that.
Awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, you're exactly right on though. There's certainly like a marketplace aspect to what we do, in that we're also trying to help agents with their carrier reach and carriers with their agent reach. There's some like functionality within the system where you can actually message like between, like an agent could send like a new carrier a message through Ask Kodiak if you're trying to get acquainted and make new connections. There's definitely like a little bit of a networking and marketplace aspect to what we do as well in connecting those two parties.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question is like routinely, when you sign up as a broker, immediately what you'll do is you'll send out requests, right, to certain carriers or markets or wholesalers that are on the platform. And you'll ask to basically get it's almost like a friend request, right? Like, so you basically get authorized or linked up. But also occasionally I'll get these notifications where it's someone I didn't even ask, and they'll come through and I'll get an email notification that says, XYZ carrier or wholesaler has authorized you on Ask Kodiak. When they kind of link up like that, what is that just giving you access to searching their products, or is there something deeper to that value proposition?
Yeah, so we call it on Ask Kodiak, we call it a trust request. You can kind of think of it as like a LinkedIn connection request, but the carriers are the distributors of insurance that are posting content on Ask Kodiak, that are hosting Appetite on Ask Kodiak. They get to decide who they want to share those product guides with and who they want to share that content with. So a carrier might decide, we only want to share with those agents that have appointments with us. So that we've got this trust request functionality where either the agent can send a carrier a trust request, or it could go vice versa. A carrier could go through and grant trust to all those agents that they work with, so that they can be a little more selective in those that they're sharing their product guides with. Or we've got a lot of distributors of insurance on the platform that just say, we want to share with everyone. We want the greatest reach possible. So they don't use that trust functionality as much, but ultimately it's up to the carrier to decide who they want to see that content.
Yeah, I think that's good too, because if you have a carrier that even you don't have direct access to, but you access through a wholesaler, if they're giving you that trust connection where you can actually see what they're writing, even if you don't have a direct appointment with them, maybe you do have an indirect access point, being another wholesaler or something that you go through, or maybe a partner agency. So that also kind of keys you in on that. So we did get a couple of questions in here so far. So the first couple really have to do with kind of how Ask Kodiak positions itself versus some of the other options that are out there, right? So Precious's question was, how's the experience different from something like maybe the My New Markets feature with the Insurance Journal?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I'm a little bit familiar with My New Markets. I think something Ask Kodiak does really well. There's probably a few different distinguishing factors I could talk about. One that stands out is that we really allow distributors of insurance appetite to get as granular as they really want to on that eligibility side. So you were kind of walking through, it goes beyond the business description and, the type of coverage you're looking for, but we're allowing carriers to play with thresholds such as, TIV, revenue, number of employees, number of vehicles, if it's like a commercial auto. And by doing that, we're creating an environment that can truly be like that single source of truth for appetite, where we allow carriers they can be as broad as they want with that appetite, or they can kind of narrow that funnel down a little further to get really specific so that agents have a really good experience in finding a carrier that actually wants to write the type of business that they've got.
Yeah, and I'm just kind of like fooling around with some of the functionality here. So like you said, like you can get pretty granular in terms of revenues, payrolls, and things like that. So yeah, it's a little bit more functional, or I would say it's a little bit more of kind of like getting the dart closer to the bullseye because of that's built into that. That's a good point. The other question that we got was from Tony Kanyas, who's like one of our super fans, which we always appreciate having Tony kind of like tune in and add to the conversation, is how is it different than, say, the value proposition at Bold Penguin? I think ultimately the mechanism of kind of pairing the carrier and the broker and the account is a little bit different, right?
Right. Yeah. So we're really like top of the sales funnel, right? We're really focused on just connecting agents to the right markets based off that initial appetite. And that's kind of as far as we go. We're just trying to make that connection. And then from there, push the agent to the carrier's workflow, get them to their, whether it's their agency appointment page or into their agency portal, whatever that next step might be. We really just focus on streamlining that connection between, okay, I have a risk, where should I place it? And oh, bingo, this is the best market for that particular risk.
Yeah, that's a good distinction. I think having had personal experience with both offerings, I also think that, you can see the differences in just kind of how both Ask Kodiak and Bold Penguin evolved. Bold
Mhm.
Penguin's really built on that kind of like exchange of business between brokers model, or even an entry point of the sales funnel, not for the carrier, but for the broker, in terms of like,
Right.
you get to list yourself as a subject matter expert in whatever construction. And if they have someone who needs, a broker to help them through the sales process, they'll link the broker up with the client. You guys are working on the top end, right? Or you're working on the carrier end, where you're trying to kind of make that broker carrier connection. And now, correct me if I'm wrong. Do you have quote rate and bind ability on Ask Kodiak, or is it just you're gathering data and then you end up putting them into the carrier's quote rate bind workflow?
Yeah, so we push them to the carrier's quote rate bind workflow. So we're not doing anything kind of beyond that, making that initial connection and doing a really good job of getting folks organized on appetite. So it's truly a transparent experience, and that we're kind of eliminating that frustration of spending time either combing through submissions that carriers don't want to write, or agents having to submit, how many different submissions, when that carrier might not actually be interested in that piece of business. So we really just play at the top of that sales funnel. And then from there, once the agent says, okay, found a product that looks great, I'm with an appetite for, from there, we're trying to push them back to the carrier's workflow and make sure they're able to quote and bind up that business.
Yeah. Yeah. I appreciate that too, because it gets really frustrating when you're a broker and maybe you don't know where the best home is for a risk.
Right.
And now you're just kind of spinning your wheels for hours on end. And most of the carriers aren't giving you, I mean, they're beginning to change, but especially if you're going through like their online quote rate bind platform, a lot of them don't necessarily give you an eligibility determination until you're pretty far into that actual process.
Right.
So that's something that you also gain here, or at the very least, you're cutting out the double work that you're doing by going to, XYZ carrier, and then 20 minutes into the online quoting process, they're like, oh, sorry, this one thing made it, not within our appetite, really.
Right. Yeah, we're trying to create a win-win relationship for both parties. It's frustrating for the brokers and the agents to go through that. And on the carrier side too, there's a lot of man hours that goes through. My background's on the carrier side. So prior to Ask Kodiak, I worked for a commercial carrier, and there's a lot of like underwriting time and energy that gets spent combing through, those submissions ultimately to go back and send a declination. So.
Oh yeah. Oh, definitely. So all right. So I think we kind of have, is there anything specific to Ask Kodiak that maybe we didn't hit on, or anything else that's part of the value proposition? Do you think that's important to kind of make brokers and agents aware of?
Yeah, on the broker side, I guess I hit on it a little bit, but I think something that's really impressive about the user experience that we've been working on and continue to improve is that search functionality, where you don't need to know the NAICS code. Our Ask Kodiak, the appetite's built off the NAICS library, which I'm guessing you're probably somewhat familiar with, the North American industry classification system, but you don't need to know like what that specific NAICS description is to be really successful in using that search bar. It's a really intuitive search bar where just describe the business as it is, and you should see results populate that you can choose from in that NAICS universe. But we're really tied into creating a good user interface, an excellent user experience, and just really smart, intuitive technology that's just going to help, again, just save time and energy in that broker experience.
Are there certain lines? There are a bunch of different lines of coverage here that are built into the system. Are there certain? I think you guys started with GL, right? Like that was the first starting point for you guys. Am I right on that one?
I mean, we play really well in the commercial lines space. There actually is some personal lines on Ask Kodiak as well, but we're pretty much all across the board in terms of commercial lines. It really comes down to the partners that we're working with. What types of products do they want to list on Ask Kodiak, and we're just kind of like we're just the technology that's able to support and kind of spotlight whatever coverage lines that they've got available.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. I think whatever you guys started with, you've definitely as more carriers came on, you've deepened the lines of coverage. So I think in the beginning, it was really tough for me to like find, say, like a workers' comp carrier for a certain type of risk. And GL and BOP seemed to be the easiest ones to go after. And that probably had something to do with also the tech aspect of things as far as, what their rating system or their appetite, data set looked like on the back end. But you guys have built out a ton. Let me just share right here. I think this is most of the carriers that you're working with right now. And just so everyone can see, this is like, again, this is just for our entertainer risk. So you can just see, like, just for that entertainer risk, the number of carriers that are included. Do you have a ballpark of the total number of carriers and wholesalers that are on the platform right now?
Yes, I think we've got about 40 carriers on the platform. And then when you include like wholesalers and MGAs, I believe we're upwards of somewhere around 70. But if you're an agent and you log in, again, go to askkodiak.com, create that free login. That page you were just on, at the very top of it, there's that carriers link that you're on, and you can just kind of scroll through and take a look at all the different carriers that have storefronts on Ask Kodiak. And then there's an other markets link right next to carriers, and that's going to show you like the wholesalers, the MGAs, some of our other technology-based partners. It's all out there for agents to take a peek at.
Yeah, and that's a good one too, because a lot of brokers, especially if they're kind of like in a small shop or something like that, they know of the bigger wholesalers that are out there that have name recognition, but you really have a ton of also specialty wholesalers and kind of program managers that are built into here too, that a lot of folks might not have, really exposure or kind of like an understanding of. Another one of our comments comes from broker Brett Fulmer, and he basically said that working with the carrier directly as a broker is a great upside. It makes it a lot easier to get help and changes. Correct me if I'm wrong, but the value proposition here really kind of facilitates that, right? So you're ultimately not trying to cut that relationship out. You're trying to streamline getting the broker to the carrier, right?
Yeah, streamline is a great way to describe it. We're really trying to bridge that connection. So we want to create kind of that community marketplace where you can go and make a new connection and work directly with the carrier, or it goes both ways, right? So the carriers can make new connections on the agency and broker side as well. But that's exactly where we're trying to play.
So you're saying carriers are cyber stalking me on Ask Kodiak? Is that
the way it goes? That's right, for better or worse.
I'm gonna have to clean up my act now.
That's right.
So we had another question that came out of Tony. Does it work for E&S business as well, or is it just standard market stuff?
I think we play really well in specialized insurance. Any like the nichier, the better, because I think a lot of times, you could probably speak to this yourself, but a lot of times those more specialized products is where brokers and agents sometimes are at a little bit more of a loss in terms of what market that they should go to. So we've got a lot of more specialized lines on Ask Kodiak, and that's actually a really sweet spot for us in terms of driving engagement and searches is folks looking for things like E&S and other more specialty commercial lines.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think some brokers, it's really tough for them because if they have a couple of really closely held carrier appointments, right, that's the first place they're going to. And pretty much 99.9999% of E&S carriers don't deal directly with brokers unless you're like a mega, right? And so say you're given an oddball risk that just doesn't fit with the standard market carriers that you're directly appointed with, that E&S functionality is really helpful.
Right.
Typically what I end up doing is I defer. If I'm not using Ask Kodiak, I'm deferring to a wholesaler to be like, all right, well, what relationships do you have that'll write this risk? What's nice is this kind of rounds that out. So if you have a wholesaler who's like your first wholesaler that you go to, and they have whatever it is, 10 carriers, you can then supplement their work by also going out here and looking at carriers that maybe either the wholesaler's not, in touch with, or maybe they just didn't know that carrier would be interested in that risk as well. Right. I always try and get all the wholesalers I work with. I have like 3 that are like my really close wholesalers I work with. I every single one of them, I was like, you got to get on Ask Kodiak. Like immediately, I was like, go troll brokers and make relationships. Like that's my value add to you, right? But at the same time, I was like, get on there because I would rather write through you. Like I want a good relationship with my wholesaler. and I don't want to necessarily have to go to some rando down the street in order to write a risk with a carrier that you're not working with. So I think that's another value proposition that's built into it. No, that's all good stuff. I would love to kind of touch on the broader kind of like Insurtech world.
Yeah.
What are some of the things that, you all are seeing at Kodiak in terms of, the major trends? I would imagine, has COVID been a positive for you guys? Has that actually been a tailwind for your business model and the value proposition?
Yeah, I think we've been fortunate through COVID. We've continued to see some growth, and knock on wood, my team and our organization, we've stayed kind of safe and healthy through this whole pandemic so far. So we've got a lot to be grateful for and optimistic about in terms of like the way we do business. I think probably across the board, I try to see the silver lining and a little bit of the glass half full, but I think across the board, it's given us an opportunity to maybe do business almost at a faster pace through being able to connect digitally, as opposed to, my background on the carrier side, so much of the insurance industry being relationship driven and, going out to meet with people, and, insurance is a bit of the long game. But I think in being able to do business over Zoom, and in my role specifically, I'm doing like touch bases weekly with our customers and making sure we're communicating. And I think pre-COVID, like people might be a little apprehensive to jump on a Zoom call and check in. So I think, there has been a little bit of a benefit in a ease of doing business and just being able to connect digitally. But I'm certainly sensitive to the fact that COVID's had its disadvantages as well.
Yeah. So. What have you seen on the carrier side? Have the carriers been, have they accelerated their timelines, or I mean, have the carriers been more interested in a solution like Ask Kodiak than they would have been in the past?
Yeah. I joined Ask Kodiak in September, so I'm newer to the Insurtech world and the software world, but I can say like on the carrier side, I don't feel like we've missed a beat, at least in terms of the connection. Like I said, I think folks are maybe a little more willing to connect because we're all, at home and kind of ready to go and sitting by our computer. So it's been kind of, nice, although I'm looking forward to reconnecting with people in the real world again, hopefully someday soon. It has been nice to be able to get business done in a pretty efficient way and still create like real genuine connections across the carrier side.
Yeah. I would say I've had enough of an opportunity to hone my digital skills, my digital ninja skills. I need some personal interaction. Like we're getting to that point where I'm like, all right, I'm good for now. Like I'll come back to it eventually, but I really need to see some people in person.
Yeah, I know. I've got my fingers crossed too that this is all coming to an end soon, and we'll at least get to see some people in real life shortly. But like I said, I try and be like a glass half full kind of person and see the silver lining. So hey, at least we've got the technology to continue to connect and do business, and for our industry, across the board, to continue to be successful through this pandemic. I think we've got a lot to be fortunate for.
Oh yeah, most definitely. So what does the future look like for Ask Kodiak? Is it just kind of more of the same, more carriers, more brokers, or are there other initiatives that are kind of on the horizon that y'all are working toward?
Yeah, future for Ask Kodiak, we continue to roll out new features. In my role in customer success, I think a lot of customer success is really in communication, and a big part of communication is just in listening to our customers, listening to what they need, what tools they need to make, their lives easier, to create an ease of doing business for them. So I think we continue to roll out new features that will be helpful to our customers and phase out old features, that aren't being used as much. So, we want to keep things simple. We want to create a great user experience, a great user interface, and hopefully continue to bring on new carriers and get new agents excited about the platform.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that's definitely something where one thing. So having Michael Albert at least one of our CPCU events, I got a real appreciation for kind of the business model at Ask Kodiak being a little bit different than the business model at some of the other Insurtech. So hopefully I'm not speaking out of class here, but I think it's completely well known. But I mean, Ask Kodiak is one of those rare Insurtechs where y'all are basically using your own money, right? Like you're not really too beholden to, these runs of venture capital fundraising and things like that. And so there's very much an organic growth aspect to Ask Kodiak. And so I've appreciated that there's also a consistency there where, it's not just kind of like, what's the syndrome? Like you just kind of like chase the next shiny thing, right? Like, that doesn't really exist for you guys. You're very much kind of like that slow and steady. Is that kind of I forgot to ask Michael, like, what's the Kodiak thing? Like, I mean, bears are cool. I love Kodiak bear stuff, but
I'll try.
Is there some kind of internal mythology behind Kodiak or what?
I'll try and do the story justice, though. Our founders, Alan Egbert and Michael Albert, they could probably tell the story better. But I think, they're really, when they're founding the company, they wanted a name that would stand out, that wouldn't be so like cliche Insurtech. And Alan, one of our co-founders' fathers, he's a photographer. And at the time, I think they were going through some of his old photos and he was photographing like Kodiak bears. And so they just said, hey, let's go with Kodiak. And I think they looked up the domain and it was would be extremely expensive to purchase. So they just threw an ask in front of it. Yeah. And we became Ask Kodiak, and really, again, just something to be a little bit unique and to stand out, something that's marketable. But yeah, that's the origin story. You can blame our co-founders' father's photography interest.
Well, the other thing I appreciate, and this might be, I know enough not to ask you your age. Okay, so this I'm gonna make the assumption that this is probably before your time or something that maybe. Maybe it is your time and you don't necessarily have to fess up to it, but the name Ask Kodiak makes me think of Ask Jeeves, right?
Okay.
As far as a search engine.
I remember that. I'm not okay.
All right.
So
you're in the know. That's good. So I always thought that there was maybe also some aspect of that where it was like, that's essentially what it is, right? It's a search engine for markets, for brokers.
That's right.
So kind of like that play on, Ask Jeeves or originally, I think Ask Jeeves either originally was or it turned into just ask.com, right?
Right.
But yeah, so part of that element I always thought was interesting. And I don't know if you guys were the first, but there just seems to be this trend in Insurtech where it's like, all right, let's take have you ever heard the story about how like you make like a really good rock band name? You just take like one inanimate object and then take like a characteristic that doesn't go with that inanimate object and put them together.
Yeah, like the street you grew up on and like your mom's maiden name, and you just shove those together and that's your new name.
It very much seems like Insurtech companies are just kind of that, like, just, all right, let's take one from column A, one from column B. That's the name of the firm. Like, definitely not the case with Ask Kodiak because it's not like, it's not like yellow Kodiak. It's,
Right. And no, we get that question a lot, where that name came from. I hope the story doesn't disappoint, but you're right. At throwing that ask in the front, it does kind of just allude a little bit more to exactly what we do as a company. We're a search engine. We're a search engine that you can look up commercial insurance on and hopefully find a home for it. So yeah, that's it. That's Ask Kodiak in a nutshell.
What would you expect? I don't know, any of the conversations internally, or maybe even, some of the events, whether it's virtual or in person, that you've kind of been involved in your past life as someone on the carrier side.
Mm-hmm.
What are you guys looking at in terms of like the future of Insurtech? I mean, does this just become, do all of these Insurtechs just basically become kind of like the R&D incubation world for the carriers out there that can purchase a lot of the Insurtechs? Or do you think that there's some other kind of, future out there for Insurtechs that maybe end up being the acquirers of other Insurtechs?
Yeah, that's a great question. If you're talking to our co-founders, they tell you that they don't think there's going to be a winner of Insurtech, so to say. I think the folks that are going to be most successful are going to be really good at doing two things. And I would say that is deliver on what you said you're going to deliver on. So if there's a problem you said you're going to solve for a customer, come through on that. And communication, I think, is huge. And when I say communication, again, we focus heavily on the listening side, of that relationship and making sure we're really hearing out our customers and their problems. I think if you can deliver on those two things, at a minimum, just do what you said you're going to do and make sure your software does what it says it's going to do, communicate effectively. I think those are really the Insurtech companies that are going to thrive. As you alluded to, we're a little unique as an Insurtech company in that we don't have like a ton of investors helping set vision and direction for us. Our co-founders are really able to kind of continue to focus us and help us kind of march forward in the direction that we think is most, helpful for our customers and our clients. And our, myself and our team, our co-founders all have a pretty extensive background in the insurance industry, and just trying to kind of lean on that to move forward in the best way possible, I think is going to be really advantageous to Ask Kodiak as well.
Awesome. Yeah, no, I think that's really prudent. That's prudent advice. I think as someone who grew up in my formative years, at the beginning of my formative years through the dot-com bubble, that was one really that was one of the things that really caused the problems in the dot-com bubble. Was you had a ton of companies that basically said that they were going to solve a problem, and they just had tons of money thrown at them, regardless of whether or not they were actually able to solve the problem, right? So and the metrics that were being used were completely ridiculous. I think we've at least learned a little bit better. So I don't know who's chiming in from the Ask Kodiak account, but
absolutely not.
we are taking questions. So whoever it is on the Ask Kodiak side, if it's Michael or someone else, we're definitely taking questions. So, but yeah, no, I think that's really important. I love those two pieces, and something that also I think Ask Kodiak embodies, that the really good Insurtechs are going to embody in the future, are this kind of like user driven design or user guided design, where the tinkering that you're doing isn't just kind of throwing darts at a dartboard to see what works, right? Mm-hmm. You're legitimately asking your customers, or at the very least your target customers, what they would like and what would help them, and that's a big deal. That's a really big deal.
Yeah, we do a lot of I would call it custom work for our customers too, through API. So like applications programming interface, basically like a set of rules that allows them to take the Ask Kodiak software and what they're building on Ask Kodiak and publish it across channels. So basically to say, you don't have to come exclusively to AskKodiak.com to play and to access product guides and appetite guides. Will give carriers the API, and they can publish their appetite and their product guides on their own, agency portals, on their own websites. So we really want to make a software that can be used across channels and really be that single source of truth for carriers. And that all kind of ties into just supporting our customers and listening to their needs and trying to help them to the best of our abilities.
So that inspires like a little bit of kind of my throw stuff against the wall and see what sticks kind of attitude. Are you guys looking at anything associated with, so it sounds like I'm operating a larger broker. We have basically an intranet set up within our organization where a lot of our employees go for their resources. And one of those resources might be, support to the marketing department. Do you have brokers that have asked or are looking to maybe take Ask Kodiak and turn it almost like into a plugin on their intranet, so that they can essentially, adopt your search engine as an internal tool, and not necessarily just have to, obviously it's easy enough just to pull up the website, but kind of adopt it as an internal tool as well?
Yeah, that's exactly what that API is for. So think of things like a lot of folks use like Salesforce for like a current workflow. And we've created, some different ways to play with Ask Kodiak and Salesforce for some clients, so that they don't have to go to AskKodiak.com to search. They can kind of do that search directly in their current workflow. So again, just helping to kind of minimize the tabs that everyone's got open and just keep things as streamlined as possible. But yeah, we're definitely interested in those types of partnerships.
Yeah, I appreciate that too, about a lot of the Insurtechs nowadays embody that, not necessarily open platform or open source, but that collaborative, relationship, or that, let's grow together kind of attitude, which I think, a lot of the industry was very compartmentalized and very kind of like, I do what I do, and I'm not going to let you know what I do because, you might get some kind of advantage over me. I think that's changing a lot. Mike K chiming in with listening is key. That's great advice. I think that's great advice in general, like regardless of whether you're talking about insurance or just life. But listening to especially key stakeholders it's huge. I can't even begin to, overstate the amount of value that you get from listening to key stakeholders. So no, I think we've done a really good job kind of like giving the stem to stern here. Is there anything else that we touched on or didn't touch on that you would love to kind of like share with the audience?
I don't think so. And I've said it a few times now, but I'll do a shameless plug if you'll let me. Again, like I said, askkodiak.com for agents. The sign up is free. So you can sign up and start searching today. But beyond that, yeah, I think we covered it pretty well.
Yeah, no, I would definitely advise any of the agents or brokers that are out there, if you're not currently signed up with Ask Kodiak, just go kick the tires on it, right? Like I said, I can't necessarily tell you that it's the bee's knees for you, right? But it is definitely an option that's out there, and if you don't know about it, it could be a really good solution. One thing to stress here, I think it's really good at small commercial and then some mid-size commercial. The mega stuff, I don't know. I mean, you might be able to get some inspiration out of it, but really, I think that was your target, right? It was mostly small commercial you guys were looking at first.
Yeah, we do a lot of, I mean, we do commercial across the board, but we play heavily in small and mid-sized commercial. To your point, I would say just kick the tires and see what's out there and see what works best for you.
Awesome. Well, Taira, I appreciate your time. I know it's valuable. Hopefully you stay warm up there in Canada.
Thank you very much. You too, in Jersey.
Yes, yeah. I'm going to go dust off the snowblower right now after I get off.
I don't envy you.
Well, the good news is my kids are going to have something to sled on, which will be good.
There you go.
Fantastic. But I get to live vicariously through them for the moment. But so, yeah, I want to thank you. I appreciate Ask Kodiak giving you the opportunity to come on here and kind of talk with us a little bit here. Again, I'm going to remind everyone, whether you're watching live or you're watching the recorded version, make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and share. Hit the notification bell. Get this out there to anyone that could use this information. And with that, we will see you next week at 3:00 Eastern. Thank you, Taira. Everyone have a good evening.
Thanks so much. Bye-bye.